Today on the show, we talk about the enduring spirit of a boy and his dog. Welcome to Lore Party, the podcast that explores the stories, characters, and universes of our favorite video games. I'm Bruce.
I'm Caleb.
And we are back at it again for more Pokemon lore. It just keeps spilling over the sides.
And thus we have been brought back into the Pokemon world, kicking and screaming. Mostly with joy.
With joy, my Poke compatriot.
Me personally, it's been joy.
Yes, if you all have just been, of course, in the know, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet came out in fall of 2022, and we were on top of it. It was a very interesting game. It was very fun. There was a lot of story ideas. There was literal a school where I could learn about lore. So I literally aced history stuff because of Lore Party and everything. Today, we're going to be talking about just a very particular kind of character study that I have kind of wanted us to start with. One of the many characters that definitely shined through all the others, in my opinion, was Arven. He's sort of like a secondary rival / companion friend that you have. I would actually say there a lot of good characters are in this game, but I think Arven takes a lot of center stage focus, and he's just a very interesting character that I would kind of want to have us discuss and talk about.
I thought this was a Brassius episode, so this is a new discovery for me. I'm just kidding. Arven is excellent and entertaining, even if I think a big part of that too is just how disarming he is, how he's almost built to give you an incorrect first impression.
Yeah. He's sort of like a red herring, but of course we will talk about that. In fact, we'll just go over what we're going to be talking about today. We're just going to dissect his whole character just as a character, as your friend / semi-rival, and a growing adolescent, just as a real person. We're going to talk about his background, who he is, our first impressions about him, his family, and the events of the game, as well as the transition that he and his partner Pokemon Mabosstiff make towards the climax and the end of the game. I'm sure this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. These are major spoiler warnings for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. If you do not want to hear any of these spoilers, please don't listen to this episode until you have finished the game or it has already been spoiled for you.
Exactly. It is an excellent story, both for Pokemon standards and just in general. So I think it is one that is, if you haven't experienced it yet, worth going into blind, because the plot twists hit like a truck. But we are deep diving into that, so.
Yeah, it'll hit you like a freight train. So, again, last warnings. Well, actually, one more warning, just for you to mull it over. Caleb, tell them where they can find us if they want to hear more spoilers and other Lore Party stuff and our new Last of Us episodes.
Absolutely. We love hearing from our listeners, so you can email us, podcast@lore_party, with thoughts, episode ideas. We also stream weekly on Twitch, so you can follow us at twitch.tv/lore_party, plus Instagram and Twitter at lore_party, and just all over the place. Obviously, if you follow us, we're doing Last of Us episodes. We're doing more Star Wars. We've got a lot going on, and some excellent kind of deep dives and explorations and episode guides. It's a good time.
It's a good time had by all, for sure. So, I guess first is why talk about this in general? Why are we just going to talk about some kid? I kind of found this topic interesting for our first new Pokemon episode of the season, just because of the sheer magnitude that Arven's story has on the entirety of the game. Whether or not you have been listening through the whole thing, but from your Chloridon or Miraidon to the Professor to Area Zero. It's all kind of interconnected with Arven's story. And of course, we all can't forget about the moment where we discovered, Arven's injured Mabostiff. And I think I can speak for everyone just vowing to help find a cure for his Mabostiff because it was really fucking sad and it tugs on your heartstrings. So it's very interesting. And then like putting that on top of him just coming from like a crappy, neglectful family life, like it's the makings of a very good character study.
It's an angle Pokemon hasn't really chased in their games or stories yet. And it's done in such an interesting way. And I think as much as there's a lot of things in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet to talk about from a story perspective, I think Arven is kind of a microcosm in a lot of ways of what overall sets Scarlet and Violet apart just from a lore and story perspective.
That's a great way to say it, microcosm, for sure.
It shows the new tone that Pokemon is willing to explore, the new degree of emotional complexity it's willing to show and describe.
I'm like, if this is the bar that we're going to start seeing now from Pokemon, like, count me in.
I'm excited for more of this.
Yeah. But first, before we get into anything, we're just going to take a quick ad break and then we'll be right back to just get into it. So first, we talk about kind of the first meeting, the interaction that we have with Arven. First impressions are always like the most important on how you kind of think of a character. It's kind of setting the stage for who they are, what you can expect from them and everything. And Arven does not start off on like the best foot with us. We first run into him at the top of the lighthouse. Well, not top of the lighthouse, at the top of Poco Path, leading like towards the lighthouse, where he's just kind of coming from the lighthouse lab where Professor Sada was, and you just were like saved, or who saved who of your mysterious riding Pokemon, Koraidon or Miraidon, depending on your game. And he's a little shit. He's just a little bitch baby, and I did not like him. He's standoffish. He's upset with everything. He doesn't like the Pokemon that is like clearly like super cool and that you can ride around on. And he's just like, he's not like taking any like big shots at you or anything, but he's just like, I don't want this. This is all dumb. I hate that thing. I hate this. This all sucks. And like, we can just go over first impressions, but mine was just like, he's pretty negative. He's a little negative Nancy. I don't like this. And like, at first seeing him, I was like, oh, great. Another just like entitled brat character who thinks that he deserves the world on a silver platter. He's just going to be a little shit. He had a strange disgust for like the Koraidon, Miraidon Pokemon. And like, he just made me very suspicious of him. And then not only that, but just like on top of me just being next to Nimona, who is just constant sunshine, constant smiles every single waking moment. It just made Arven feel more just dickish.
She is a constant ray of sunshine and also a magnifying glass at the same time. But I think like with Arven though, my first impression of him was less a dislike or a disgust, but more an indifference. He seemed like the same archetype of character that we've seen a bunch of different times in the game. Because you run into like both the grumpy Pokemon are stupid characters and the grumpy like Pokemon are tools characters.
Right.
Like almost every game, majority of most movies, sometimes they're the antagonist, sometimes they're the rival, sometimes they're defeated, sometimes they have their heart changed. And so I think I just didn't really have much of an opinion of Arven one way or the other, because as soon as he was introduced, I'm just like, oh, silver, but another one.
Right. Like, it's just we've seen this before. I think it is essentially a kid's game, but we've seen other kids' games go into much more like, complicated, emotionally complex stories and characters. But, Game Freak has never really pushed the envelope on us having like more, especially for like, these side characters than a an actual three-dimensional character. Where we see Arven as just like, okay, I can tell this is what you're going to be through the whole way, and maybe you'll change your mind after we meet a legendary Pokemon and friendship and whatnot. And it doesn't exactly go that way, and I'm very surprised by this, and I'm very like, it's refreshing. I'm happy to hear that it kind of goes in a different way, and I think it starts going in a different way in terms of his background.
As the game goes on and we start seeing a little bit more of what brought him to that point, that's where, oh, like this is like actually a twist of those archetypes, and he is actually a surprisingly well-rounded character.
Well, yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna just like say that I guess the background of some of these, like, not antagonists, but not even like I would say anti-hero characters, but just like other side characters who are around your age, sometimes have had a very difficult upbringing. I would say definitely like Silver is one of the best examples, where he had a literal mafioso crime syndicate boss for a dad who either died or left. But we're kind of seeing this in a different light when we go to Arven. But, starting from the beginning, from what we learn as we go along in the game, Arven has had a very difficult upbringing. He is a child of the famed Paldean professor, either Sada or Toru. And, this professor has already created like the latest and greatest technology of like terrestrialization and is exploring the Great Paradox Pokemon and the Area Zero. Like, they have gotten so many different accolades, but Arven is kind of just in their shadow all the time. Like, Arven could care less about this. The point of all of their success is that they have neglected their son, Arven, at almost every juncture. They're never home. They don't like make sure that they are in Arven's life as well as he would want them to. And depending on, however you feel like is, because of what happened through the events of the game, it is everything that has led up to the game that still has that whole essence of neglect and, lack of their presence in his life.
We start seeing pictures and elements of his relationship with his Pokemon, his Mastiff slash Mabastiff, just because they were the one of the few things in his life that actually showed him affection.
Yeah, like this whole unconditional, constant affection in his life that it doesn't seem like he got from his parent. And on top of that, we also learn while we're in Area Zero later on in the game that in the professor's notes, the other parent of Arven just leaves, walks out. So they've been a single parent, and not through death, but because the other father or mother of Arven just quit. They left. That also then adds more abandonment issues to Arven. He feels already unwanted by half of his parental units. And then, you've got the other one who's just so engrossed in their work that they can't even be able to give him, the time of day.
While he was with his professor parent in Area Zero, one of the very powerful Pokemon there attacked him, and Mabastiff protected him, but it resulted in them being injured so badly that even Pokemon centers were struggling to help them.
Like, think about that for a second. We are talking about a entire society that is more or less revolving around an international blood sport of superpowered animals attacking each other daily, where you just put them in a little capsule ball, do the, doodly doo, and then they magically get better, like in seconds. And that is not enough for this Mabostiff to be better. There is something that is so fundamentally injured in its entirety, in its physical makeup, that it cannot be healed. That is a huge, a visceral kind of injury. That's not just like easily fixed. It's something that isn't just like bad. It's like terminal, it seems. That doesn't happen a lot. And, other than stuff that happens in maybe like the anime where, they can't heal properly, or like fan theories, it is almost unheard of.
Exactly. And like we had that with what was it? There was the fan theory that went around with Red and Blue
Mm-hmm.
that when you visit Lavender Town, the Pokemon Tower, you run into your rival there. A lot of people were theorizing that he was at the tower mourning a Pokemon that had died because his Raticate is no longer on his team at that point. So some people had theorized that your rival's Raticate had died, and this was generally treated as silly creepypasta fan theory, except in this game, essentially that same thing is canon.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing is like we have always had like this whole subculture of like very adult themes in like Pokemon games, which have like been all but confirmed, especially like with Lavender Town and like, Pokemon can die and like, the Cubone's mother thing. But we don't really, it's more or less after the fact. I think this whole Mabostiff thing gives a different perspective where it's like kind of in the middle of this, like, that this Pokemon has sustained these very terminal injuries very recently, and you're seeing it when you're seeing it like struggle standing up or speaking. Like, that's rough. That really hits you. And you can only imagine how that could be for Arven. Like, this is your childhood pet that you have grown up with, a pet that, has shown you more love than your one parent who walked out and your other parent who's too busy being beloved by the world to give you the same kind of love that your dog does. And then while you are on this, dangerous trip in Area Zero, while your parent is probably like out doing a bunch of tests and research while you're left alone again, you're out exploring with your Mabostiff, and one of the many really tough Pokemon comes out of nowhere and just decimates them. In some regard, Arven, I'm sure, can feel like the blame on their Mabostiff getting hurt like that is Area Zero, is the things that come out of it, and of course, their parent. If they weren't in Area Zero, none of this would have happened to his Mabostiff, and none of this would have happened to his, the estranged relationship between him and his parent. It's all because of this stupid Area Zero. So, like, it makes sense that maybe he doesn't really like Miraidon or Koraidon merely because, like, damn, that is a place of actual trauma that he had escaped. And then out of nowhere, this kid rolls up with one of those things. Like, screw that.
Combine all of that together, and there's just this element of it makes a degree of sense why you find him in the emotional state he's in at the start of the game. And it's just one of those things where it's interesting that his motivations are explored and discussed that thoroughly, because like for the most part, if we get that for other characters in a Pokemon game, it's significantly briefer. It's a lot more simplified, and it's just really interesting just letting that emotional complexity sit there. I think on that note, though, I think we are going to head into another break. So
We'll catch you on the flippy dip. So last when we were talking, Arven was just like going through all of this crazy shit, estranged parent relationship, escaped from the traumatic experience with his childhood dog, and rolls up to his old like house at the lighthouse lab off Poco Path, and in rolls, the main character and Nimona and the riding Pokemon from Area Zero. And, putting that in perspective, he is understandably upset. But it definitely rubs me, and probably was designed to rub a lot of players the wrong way. But now, let's talk about Arven's journey. This is all that we talked about, everything that has happened before the events of the game, before we meet him. And now we get to talk about how we, learn about Arven and see his journey as he progresses through the treasure hunt at the academy, and just kind of the person that we learn that he is. So after seeing how powerful the main character is, Arven kind of enlists your help in getting the Herba Mystica, a set of herbs brought from Area Zero decades before, I think 100 years before, when some scientists came down and they planted it around the region. He's got like this little book. It's either the Scarlet book or the Violet book, which is just like, a recounting of each of the different herbs and where they might be hiding. He took that from like the Lighthouse Lab, and he wants to just get our help in doing that. And that's one of the main three quests, is like finding these herbs and then having to fight the Titan Pokemon, which is a fun little mechanic. Everything's cool like that. But after the first one that you usually do, when we leave, Arven then kind of like, again, they paint it in a very like malicious light or lack thereof, and he's like saying, all right, come on out, to like something that he like lets go of in the shadows. And you're just like, who is he talking to? What is this? What's going on? Caleb, what was your first impression of that? Were you like, okay, that's it, evil?
I was definitely suspicious. I think there was definitely just an element of it where, honestly, I was expecting him to end up with the opposite bike. So I was playing Violet. I was expecting him to have a Koraidon.
Oh, that's a good idea. I like that.
But like that isn't really the direction they went with it.
Like, I thought that it was going to be like, he's got this like really like Pokemon we've never seen before, like possibly legendary, possibly just like very powerful, but like sentient Pokemon that's like pulling the strings, or like, something else that he thinks is gonna like fix all his problems, but isn't, because he just wanted to take the easy route. Just something where he's not like pure evil, but like he has misplaced intentions that end up hurting people, or just something like that, where he'll be antagonistic in that way. But we were both wrong.
Eventually, they do the big reveal where he talks about what his motivation has been all this time. He lets out of the ball his elderly Mabastiff, and immediately our hearts are captured and held prisoner.
It is a really good reveal, especially like after the first one. You have to do other stuff, you got to level up, but in the back of your mind you're just like, what did he have there? What happened? Like, I got to know. And you do the second one, and you finally like, after another like terse interaction with, your ride Pokemon, he's like, okay, here, this is why I'm actually collecting it. Because he first wants the whole thing to be collecting the Herba Mystica so he can make these sandwiches for his like culinary career, for his treasure hunt. But the real reason is that he wants to use them, as they are said to have a cure for any like injury or ailment for his Mabastiff who was injured. And like, I was shocked that I would not have ever assumed that was the reason. it made me respect Arven on a completely new level. It was easily the first goal that I finished in the game. I was like, we are gonna fix your dog and you're gonna be happy and he's gonna be happy and this is all fine. This is gonna be great. It changed my view completely of Arven. Pokemon usually has a very difficult time hiding its villains. You can usually tell very, very easily who's going to be your antagonist, who's going to be the secret villain. Like
they've gotten a little bit better
they've
at
gotten a
that. Like
little bit better, but like I saw like Chairman Rose coming a mile away. I will say, and you can go back on this. I knew Volo was going to be evil immediately. I was like, that dude's too nice. He's evil. I'm usually good at this.
that's interesting. I called Volo before the reveal, but not nearly as fast as I should have. It very close to the actual reveal that I'm like, okay, something's not right here.
As soon as I saw him, I was like, there's something wrong. There's something off. You're fucked up in some way. Yeah, Arven was different. Like this was interesting. I don't know if it was like an intentional bait and switch, but like it was good.
The big thing that got me in this whole thing is just like how unique this is as a Pokemon story, but at the same time, how much sense it makes. So we've seen these moments in Pokemon stories before where we've needed to assist sick Pokemon, where someone's been attached to a partner that like is older, but Arven's reaction in that specific moment made it feel just very real, very profound. Seeing a character who had just been very emotionally detached. I think that's actually a good example of it. He, as someone who had been going out of his way to keep people at arm's length, like seeing him as the Mabostiff story goes on, get to a point where he is like on his knees crying, hugging his Pokemon, just made it feel like very real, very profound.
It is a truly like earned amount of trust. He doesn't just go out the gate. Like this would not have had the same impact if we meet him at the lighthouse and he's like, howdy, I'm Arven and I am here and like I hate my mom or dad and I want you to help me find the Herba Mystica so we can heal my sick dog. He got real fucked up, real bad, and you're my new best friend now. I would be like, I don't give a shit. I don't care. You're not real to me.
Look, you can just say Wally's name. You don't have to subtweet him like that.
Fuck you, Wally. You little bitch. I don't care. I don't care about anything that you're doing. I don't care about your dreams. I don't care about your goals. I don't care about who you are. You are not real. You are a self-insert. I don't care. I don't care about you. I don't care about Wally. I don't care about oh my god. Barry. Thank you. You knew. I was about to say, who's that little blonde asshole? Barry. Fuck you, Barry. I don't care about you. Like it's those like misses that makes me like so much more appreciative of Arven, where he could have been this write-off side character who never frowns, who always smiles. Like there's so much complexity to this, and you actually have to earn his trust so he can be able to share with you something that he really does not like to talk about, like for good reason. We like as we get closer to like healing his Mabostiff, he starts to become, less standoffish and anxious and, arm's length with you, and with some other people. And like at the same time, we have like the sandwiches that we give to Koraidon or Miraidon, which like brings their abilities back. So then we get like some calls from the professor parent, and like Arven's just like, hey, are you gonna talk to me? Like you're seeing this kind of like breakdown of communication between Arven and their parent, and like it sucks to see, and it makes you like it made me like a little uncomfortable because I was just like, I wanted to have the option to just be like, hey, do you want to talk to your kid for a second? I know like it seems like this has been a thing.
Like imagine if like you're constantly clamoring for your parents' attention and you find out that like They end up calling your friend almost every time you and them hang out afterwards.
I'd be pissed. I'd be like, what's going on? Hey, you want him to be your new son? Like, what's going on? We also see that his story begins to intertwine with the main story, where other characters and other like side stories kind of are finished with a neat, tight bow on it. Arven's isn't exactly finished once we heal his Mabostiv, which again is a heartwarming, beautiful moment. But it's kind of like bittersweet as like the professor is just like, oh, cool. Also, the Pokemon from the writer Pokemon, Miraidon or Koraidon, is also at full capacity. Come down and, help me out with it.
The mechanical callousness of that whole situation is striking.
Yeah, I was starting to feel like there was something off.
And exactly. And I think like with all of that, that ends up continuing once we get to the late game, kind of the fourth route, as it were.
Right. Like, after you're finished with like the other quests with like Penny and Nimona and like you beat the all the gyms and the Elite Four and you take down Team Star, and of course heal the Mabostiv, there's a last story that you need everyone together to like come around. And it was really cool to like have like a cool cutscene where like Arven's parent professor asked them to like come down to like return the book and like help them out with some stuff. And you, Arven, Penny, Nimona all like get to the edge of the Area Zero gate and like, you know, jump off and like glide through the air. And I'm just like, that's a cool group. That's great. It feels earned. It feels like a real cohesive group that like you helped put together. You're seeing like this really nice like moment come together as you go into again what Arven would definitely feel is traumatic, but like with these friends and with you and with like him being able to open up, he feels a bit more, I would say, like, happier and optimistic going into than he would have just on his own.
You start going through it, and I think there is a well shown sense of the extent to which what you're going back through is a degree of Arven and Mabostif overcoming that pain. There's a point that Arven recognizes the Pokemon that initially defeated Mabostif. There's points where he talks a little bit about his familiarity with that area. But then as you get closer to the end of Area Zero, you find out a much, much darker revelation and plot twist.
The venture down in there is a pretty cool experience, but then it starts to get a little bit more somber as we kind of go along. And you discover just this like dark revelation once you get to like the last bit of the bit of Area Zero with the facilities. You go through some of the diaries and everything. One of the second last facilities is like all messed up and like definitely looks like there has been like a battle in there that's been left just decrepit for quite some time. There's like some inklings that there is something wrong. I think a lot of people, much of myself, expected, especially in the second to last facility, where the professor was like having to basically shut down and reboot themselves. That I was like, oh, this is just a recorded message or like a very well planned, AI with like a bunch of different answers, and they're like gone in the past or something. But no, it's much more fucked up than that. It is the fact that, while Arven like goes off, you are the first one to be able to kind of go into the last facility. And there you see the professor, but there's something clearly wrong with them. And they're like, yeah, so I am an AI android who has all the memories of the professor, but the professor fucking died. And I don't mean like they tripped and fell. They explained in even more detail than I was expecting, that the Alpha Koraidon or Miraidon and your Miraidon or Koraidon got into a fight. The professor tried to stop it and died in the process, which feels to me is sort of like they got mauled. They got destroyed, succumbed to their injuries, I believe the term was.
It leads to a very exciting, very climactic for you, the player, final battle. But as you kind of get to the end of that story, even there's a moment that Arven enters the time machine room, sees the fake professor, and Arven is able to put together kind of like what's going on relatively quickly.
Yeah, he's like, all right, who are you really? Like, I know my mom and or dad, and you're not it, Chief. Like, what the hell is going on? Like, and we have this terrible moment after you beat the professor the first time, and like they're kind of like short circuiting as they're like laying eyes on Arven, and like this android has never actually met Arven, but they have all the memories of its creator, who is the parent of Arven. And they're like, oh, look how big you've grown. So proud of you. Oh, I'm sorry. You were alone so long. And like, it's gut wrenching because like there's no real comparison for this, because like this is like a semi self-aware AI that is supposed to be some sort of like digital copy of a person who is now dead, who is reacting to seeing their like son, who has grown, who has developed, who has become what they are so proud to see. And they don't know what to do with those emotions. They're giving this reaction, but like at the end of the day, you're just like, is that real? Are you actually reacting? Or is this just like what your AI programming is telling you to? It's messed up on so many different ways.
It's this intense moment, but then like even after it, even after you defeat them and there's the farewell and kind of everyone moves on and the Academy Ace tournament happens and all of that, like, and like he puts on a smile and battles you with his Pokemon. Like there is like the intense and interesting like sense of even after that moment the world moving on. And I think this is where you and me have the interestingly like slightly different takes on this.
Yeah. Cause like to me, after the events of everything, you know, are able to beat the AI clone version of Arven's dead parent, which he just learns like the same time we do, same day. Throughout this entire game, Arven thought that his mom or dad was still around, still here, like being an asshole and not there for you, but like still alive. And then one day you go and do this big giant event, and then you find out they're dead. And then you have to have a conversation with your fake parents' android. And then after that, your friend has to beat the shit out of them until they break. And then you know, they send themselves back into the time machine, either into the future or into the past. And then you just have to go back home. Arven is an orphan now. He just realized he has no legal guardian anymore. His parent, who he was very like already estranged with, is dead. The other one left. I solemnly believe that Arven is just not okay. He has not received closure. Everyone else had a wonderful little story wrap up. They got their little like moment. They got to cry. They got to be happy. And Arven did too. But then we went a little bit further into a story, and like there's no closure there. There's not real closure. Arven can like have a smile on his face during the Ace Academy, but like That's not going to bring his mom back. That's not going to make him unsee his fake mom telling everyone like, "Oh, you have to beat the shit out of me so you can save the world and not have this time machine unleash hell on this entire region. You have to do this." And then he goes home and he's like, "Well, time to sleep in my cot. Sure hope, I have anything tomorrow." All he has left is his dog. And maybe that's what he always had before, but like that's not real closure.
I think the you saying all he has is his dog, I think that's where kind of that's actually a really good segue into kind of my counter to that, and kind of where I think our opinions on that diverge, because I very much got a sense of Arven's theme in his story being one of finding and accepting chosen family, because I do think there was this element of obviously like the whole experience brought him closer to his Mabastiff, but it also brought him closer to you. He's excitedly referring to you as a best friend well before this moment. He's obviously like building a friendship with both Penny and Nimona as this whole thing is going on. Like they are becoming a mutually supported friend group slash family unit in the way that Pokemon friend groups are wont to do. But I think if you look at the final cutscene before the post game coming out of Area Zero, there's kind of a moment of him kind of like standing back, grappling with that loss that the other characters kind of call out to him and kind of like go join him. And I think with that was kind of where I think I would agree on Arven not entirely getting closure, but I think that part of my takeaway from the end is that there doesn't need to be closure to that kind of grief, where there was a sense of, despite the thing that he has lost and despite the grief and sadness from realizing both what he's lost and what he's misunderstood for as long as he did, because it isn't just that he found out his parent is dead, it's that he also found out that he's lost that time of having a damaged opinion of his mom or his dad, thinking that they had abandoned him when really they had just died. And I think there is that grief and that loss, but at the same time, he has found and built relationships that he didn't have before, that he had struggled to build and find before, both with kind of rebuilt and regained that relationship with Mabastiff. He has repaired his relationship with Koraidon or Miradon, and his opinion of his parents is also improving, because you see a little bit of his own post-game story is him learning a little bit more about his parents' legacy and learning a little bit more about like what his parents were actually like, and showing a little bit more of a willingness to explore that. And I think I like that it was able to allow him to experience both of those emotions, both the sadness of what he lost and the joy of the things that he's gained or regained, and not had them contradict each other or try to zero sum each other.
I can absolutely respect that. And I do like the fact that he did, have a good like earning of found family. But like I do disagree that like this was not just like a manufactured estrangement between him and his parent. The whole like fact that he has felt neglected by his parents has been something that Arven has talked about before the events of the game. What we know, at least in what I was like looking at in the timeline of it, was that Arven's Mabastiff like got injured. He had to get the fuck out of there. Then the Pokemon professor dies, and then you see the Koraidon and Miraidon escape Area Zero, glide through the area and then crash land on the beach. So anytime before like the injuring of Mabastiff is on that parent for what they did in either neglecting Arven, which I still think has happened.
That is true. I will walk that part of that back. But yeah, like that's still a lot of emotions to deal with. Even if I think it could have been dealt with a little bit more directly, I think that for the story that it was telling, I was impressed that Pokemon was able to balance those emotions very effectively.
Absolutely. I think the closest we ever got was, I would say, Sun and Moon with Lily, if you remember her, and the trauma that she had with her mother, who like was just totally evil, had this whole like evil, empire thing and trying to get the Ultra Beasts. And Lily was like actually traumatized by, one of the Ultra Beasts, and her mother looked at her as a tool. That was a really good complexity, but like they really again fucked up the execution of it because she didn't seem real as much. She didn't seem like, at the end of the day, she learned to like Pokemon, but like there wasn't as much closure with her mother. There wasn't as much of anything. And I think that, Arven is a much better step in that direction.
Well, that about wraps it up. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please take a second to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us grow the show, and be sure to connect with us on Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter at lore_party. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Later.